Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Giordano, and today I'm sitting down with Emil Grímsson, the CEO of Arctic Trucks Polar and Arctic Trucks International. We discuss the origin of Arctic Trucks in Iceland and how Emil turned the Top Gear Arctic Special into a career of polar exploration. Grímsson touches on his role during the Trans-Global Car Expedition, the world's first wheeled surface navigation through both geographic poles, and how lessons learned in the previous expeditions landed him where he is today. Our conversation continues with a discussion around differences between Arctic Trucks branches in Europe, the UK, and North America, and why the polar region draws Emil back time and time again. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks for tuning in. Hello and welcome to the Overland Journal Podcast. I am very excited to have Emil Grímsson here with me today. And Emil is the chairman of Arctic Trucks and self-proclaimed polar addicted. Thank you so much for joining me today, Emil. I'm really excited to chat with you about all things Arctic Trucks and expeditions and polar.
Very pleased to be with you. Thanks for inviting me here.
No problem. Yay. Yeah, we were just chatting and you were saying this is the first podcast you've been on. So I'm honored. So it's a great honor for Overland Journal Podcast to have you on. So exciting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think I could be as bold to say that you legitimized high floatation tire modifications in Iceland. Do you think that that is an accurate statement?
Maybe not.
Sort of.
I mean, I had a big, let's say I have a big part in that history. But if I go a little bit back and into my background is basically I grew up in a small village in north of Iceland where there's a lot of snow.
Which village?
It's called Húsavík.
Which village is it? Okay.
Húsavík is up in the north, close to Akureyri. But we would sometimes get 5 newspapers, 6 newspapers at a time because there was no access to the town for over quite some time, and so that was sometimes quite interesting. So when I joined Toyota Iceland in '89, I have the will, or I had the motivation that I wanted to make the Toyota clients the most happiest clients of any car company in Iceland. So I was a marketing director, and I started to analyze what makes people happy. And so I did a lot of stuff, but one of the things that I noticed at that time is that some clients were modifying the cars. They had discovered that big tires, low tire pressure, had given them big advantage in snow over the normal. But what they were doing, they were lifting the cars to fit the big tires. They were lifting them very high, and it was affecting steering, and it was stability. They were doing it in all sorts of ways. So it was affecting reliability and how you could service the vehicle. So the clients were complaining to me, well, your guys are threatening me. They're saying you'll lose warranty. This is dangerous. So I asked why are we doing that, and I was pointed out all the issues with this. So I start asking how do we make this better? How do we make this something that Toyota can service and we can work with this and really meet the demand or the request from the clients. So in that way, inside Toyota, I was leading the way to set this up. My first thing was to think that we needed better lift kits. So I went to the US and I got TMS to help me to meet the suppliers and things like that. But basically, we discovered a bit later, that we need to rethink how this was done. We basically needed to try to go back and do it in another way, which meant, very little lift, rebuilding the body and the frame to accommodate the tires and keep the balance in the car different. It was a big step to take, to cut the new car all apart.
Yeah.
And kind of modify it in a way that you cannot take it back. But we did, and we established it, and we called it first Toyota Accessories. But Toyota Japan was interested, but they didn't really want to, take any responsibility. So we needed another name. We couldn't use the Toyota name for something was not approved by them. Or officially, it took them 10 years until they started to kind of give us some more recognition. But in the beginning, it was we don't know about this.
Yes.
So basically, that's how the name Arctic Trucks came about. And I became finance director and managing director and then president for Toyota Iceland. But this was always a bit part of my heart. And when I left Toyota Iceland, I bought the Arctic Trucks operation out of it. So 2005, It's independent from Toyota, although our relation with Toyota is very, very strong and historic.
Excellent. So when you were growing up in Northern Iceland, did you ever think as a young boy, I'm going to end up working with vehicles, or was this something that you were completely surprised when you came out of school and you went to Reykjavik to work with Toyota?
Yeah, I think I always had a car interest, but I don't, I think as a young, I was thinking of pilot or something like this.
A different
But
kind of mechanical inclination.
yeah. But I mean, I ended up taking an MBA in the US in San Diego, and my idea at that time was to stay in the US and maybe do work with marketing. But I ended up in Toyota, Iceland, and I was going to stay there for 3 years and then maybe go back to US, but I never did. But I don't know how it comes about, but I think where I am, I mean, for the longest time, I'm kind of like a businessman, but I am always have this interest in adventure, and maybe I'm doing some adventures. But in 2007, I decided to go by myself, to organize and help doing that trip with Top Gear, going to the magnetic North Pole.
That's right.
And
did they approach you about this project?
So basically, Toyota UK, Toyota GB asked me, they called me, and because I was very well inside the Toyota system, and they, the marketing guy, they asked me, so can we make a Hilux drive to the magnetic North Pole? And I remember I answered, yes, I think so. And then I asked, where's the magnetic North Pole? I didn't even know. I first said, right. I think so. But that basically started a new kind of era in my life, in the sense that I started to study sea ice, started to study very much the maps, because I already had done quite a bit in Iceland, so I kind of knew what conditions, how white out and these things, what the dangers you have to think about. But then you add to it, the enormous distances that you have to deal with, and you have to deal with sea ice. That was something completely new as well. So at that point in my life, I basically got this urge, I would say. So even if that expeditions was quite tough, it was a lot of fun, and I came back, I think I lost 7 kilos in 7 days or something like that.
Oh, wow.
But, because, we were on all the time. But after this, I kind of I need to do it again. That kind of made that kind of this excitement, this singularity in you have one project, you have one goal. The whole team has the same goal. You're together. You're thrown out with different challenges, and you're with very interesting people. This basically got me to. I realized that when we finished, that I hadn't thought about any of my normal daily things. Have I called my, father or my mother or my sister, or have I answered an email, or all of these things? They just disappeared. They were not there. And when I realized it, that after some days, that I kind of wait a minute, I hadn't thought about these things. Everything that I had ongoing in my life, I have went to sleep 6 times without ever even thinking about it, and that kind of changed everything.
It's like type 2 fun, but it's also a form of escapism and being in the zone, I imagine.
It's in some sort of zone, I really, it really, you come back, you're tired, you're, really happy, you're gonna get a super happy for a normal toilet and a shower. But there is something that pushes you, I want to do this again.
I imagine that trip was, and again and again and again. Yeah. I imagine there was a fair amount of stress on that project, being one of the first, but also having a film crew and a schedule, because this was for the Top Gear Polar Special.
Yeah.
So what was that like, managing the film schedule and all of the work that you had put into problem management, I guess?
Yeah. So, I mean, I hadn't really, because I didn't know Top Gear at the time when I'm asked about this. So I got to learn it, over this time during this project. I got to learn that they were very big, they were very popular, and I got to know them personally, the guys there. And I it was a super good crew, and also, the guys, they were really, really focused on making good TV. And the guys that were there, they were all quite good. And overall, I mean, it was very successful. And I loved it. It was a lot of fun. And I mean, it's demanding, but what I kind of like surprised me was how much time they spent sometimes in trying to make a one shot. And then out of the program, you would spend hours. And the difficulty maybe with that is when you have to stand still and don't have anything driving, and you have to have, for 2 hours, and this turns into a few seconds in a program. It's like, and that's when you get cold, when you have to stand still and not talk and be silent or be out of the camera and things like that. But in a way that there was no problem. It's just like I was just surprised how much time it took and the effort they put into making this a good TV.
What a fantastic experience. So from there, you launched into dozens of expeditions and expedition support missions.
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest one that I took on, and probably the next one, was that we were asked if we can support a ski race going to South Pole and starting from Novo runway, and that's a very long distance. And that was Antarctica. And if I were to, I'm surprised today how willing, how much risk you're willing to take when you're younger. I didn't have so many informations, so it was a really, really kind of like, it was working with what if, and trying to deal with this in an Excel. How much fuel will you use? Then we have to take more fuel. Okay, will we then be able to drive in the snow, or what will be the cold? Will the engine work in this altitude? And there were so many things we had unknown at this time, and we succeeded. And that turned into a BBC program. It was called On Thin Ice, which was a ski race. And it was that expedition we learned the biggest lessons. There was a lot of difficulties that happened and big stories. But I think that's one of the most challenging expeditions we have taken on. And but everything that when you repeat things, they come easier, and you maybe sometimes forget. You have to respect them. But now in Antarctica, we have done over 420,000 kilometers on the plateau, which is huge. And that is Antarctica is like, it's another dimension. And again, you're a bit in another world. Although now this year was the first time I had Starlink, and that was pretty amazing to be able to connect, take up Messenger and talk, or talk in a quality phone call or something like that. But in a way, it's fantastic, and in a way, it's kind of like, where is it? How connected we are today. You can't get away from that point. So you still get your email.
True.
You still get,
Does it take you out of the moment as well? I mean, I'm finding that being on the road when we had Starlink, you're not as present. So did you feel like you were in another dimension again when you had Starlink?
Yeah, I think, in a way, everybody gets into Starlink. Everybody gets online. Everybody has another life somewhere. And I feel that it's fantastic to be able to do your things, but it takes away a certain amount of isolation, and the team is, you're not depending on each other exactly like you were before, in the sense of you have only these people to talk to, and you have only these people to seek information from, and it's there's something lost, there's something gained.
Yes, very well said.
You're still quite isolated, but you are mentally not as much on the spot as before.
Yes. I was going to ask you, what were some of those biggest takeaways on that ski race expedition? You said you learned a lot and some big lessons. What were a few of those?
Yeah, so in the first expedition we did, in Antarctica, we did an expedition in 1996. It went onto the plateau, and it was done with the Swedish Polar Science Institute, and it was with Haglund's snowmobiles. So we had some little backup there. But we used the tires. We used Land Cruiser 44 which were the CPEC tires at the time. So I knew a little bit what was working. But they only went up to 2,000 meter altitude. They went a very short distance. But now we had to do 1,600 kilometers without getting into fuel. And the fuel that we were at that point was, dug down, and we wouldn't even know if we could find it, or how to reach it. Because it was thrown out on an airplane with the fuel drums. and some of it had sunk into the snow or had been blown over. And we were going to 3,400 meter altitude, and the oxygen level is lower than at the equator is, so you can almost add 1,000 meters more. And both the distance, and we were using 4x4 Hiluxes, and we needed to move a lot of stuff, a lot of equipment, and people. So it's kind of like, if I load the Hilux with 1,500 kilos, how will it do? But then I realized it's not going to be enough. I'm going to have to move 3 tons. And then I have to have a trailer. But how much fuel will it use then? I don't know the conditions. I don't know the snow. And so it was kind of like back and forth going, how we would deal with this. And in the end, in this expedition, there was a plane crash. There were different types of things that happened that stressed everything to even over the limits that we had. So we started, axles started to break, and there was a lot of fixing to be done. So one thing led to another, but we kind of came crippled into South Pole, but managed to do all the service. But then we managed to get a flight into South Pole with spare parts, more axles basically, and a gearbox, and all of these things kind of like we got back, okay, but we had to go back to the drawing table, and we had to redesign some of the bearings and different axles and things like that we had in the vehicle. We also had to rethink on how much we can load each vehicle. When will it start to break? So we started to give us some more margin. But we also learned that we were okay with jet fuel. The engine worked. It was just very, very slow. We could go down to minus 50 degrees centigrade, and we've done even lower than that. We learned that the tires, they started to break, form cracks in this frost if we didn't move. So that was one of our biggest risks, was how to get going again if we had to stop. But that also led to that we started to try to develop a new tire, which we did with Nokian, which has made it's a much better tire for the conditions. But we had to look out, how can we improve, how do we do this in a way that we can sustain ourselves, and all the communications with base. How do you work things out? How do you make the plan about if there is a flight coming with somewhere? Can they land with you, or how can they land? When can they land? What type of weather do they need so they don't crash? It was a lot of stuff that came down.
It's high stakes learning right there.
No, but it's things just escalate sometimes. You have, in this case, what went wrong was that you couldn't take the people that were going to go to acclimatize. Our plane was supposed to pick them up and fly them to the new point that we were going to meet them and start the race. And this plane cannot come because of weather. And that becomes 1 day and 2 days and 3 days. So part of the cars need to return and to give them food because they're running out of food. And then, finally, when the plane can go, we have lost too many days. So you have to get the other cars that are already on location waiting for them. They have to move the start line further south to reduce the race. And then they have to move a lot of people and then and fuel. And then they overload themselves and then they start to break. And then the 2 cars that are following are now too late. They have a small break or they have a breakdown because of human error, basically. And then a plane is supposed to come and bring a spare part and crashes.
Yeah.
So things just kind of like go into these things. But luckily since then we have basically not faced anything, nothing like this. I mean, we haven't had any injuries, other than people that are on the ski race. They have had some sores, from the frostbite, I think it's called.
Right. So you're providing expedition support for a lot of expeditions. Maybe it's skiing, maybe it's like the pole to pole EV mission. I believe you supported that project as well. So when you're on the ground, what is the role of expedition support? Are you doing logistics? Are you providing a vehicle in case somebody gets stuck? How are you transporting people out? What are the responsibilities, I guess, when you're involved?
So if we, it's a pretty wide spectrum.
Yeah.
Today, if we're doing a kind of like what we call a light expedition, which is not like pulling a whole research team with a lot of equipment. But if we are doing something like putting out seismic sensors, or we are doing support to skis, or we are doing different types of things like that, we are traveling 3 to 5 times faster than the national programs do on the belt vehicles, and we are using 5 to 10 times less fuel. So we have basically kind of very unique status for servicing certain things. So this is very good for, when you have a ski competition or something like that, where you need people to needed a film crew, you need a doctor, you need things like that to monitor people. When you want, or a group that wants to ski together, and somebody, if there's 5 people skiing together and one of them is not feeling good, everybody has to wait for this one person. If you have a support with the vehicles, then you can pick that person up until he feels better and everyone can continue. We are doing, we've done these ski races was, Top Gear was the first, and then on thin ice, and we had some in German and Austria programs. We had Walking with the Wounded.
Right. Tell me a bit about Walking with the Wounded.
Walking with the Wounded was a very nice program where they are. It was an organization trying to inspire people that have been injured in soldiers that have been injured, and there's mostly like the Commonwealth people that it's a UK program, but they have American soldiers as well in some of this, and it has they're doing different types of things, and one of these was to go to make a race to South Pole. It was between US, Britain, and then Commonwealth, which was a combination of Canada and Australia. And then you had, in each team there was a famous person, and Prince Harry was in the English team, and then you had some actors in the other teams, and Dominic West and Alexander Skogard were in this as well. So we basically fly them in until they have about 350 kilometers to South Pole. And then we drive first 2,000 kilometers to get to the location, get ready. And then they come with a plane. We put up a little skiway and they land. And then the race was supposed to go to South Pole. But we quickly realized after 100 kilometers, things were not going very well. The people were the competition was hard, and they were really kind of just damaging themselves. They were getting frostbites and things like that. And so we decided to change the setup and move them until they had 100 kilometers away and stop the race. We already had enough drama for the TV and
right.
And do this. And that was also kind of encouraged because Scott and Greg Miller, and they were coming on 7. They were coming with one of our car at the same time, and I knew they would be driving by us, and I was running out of fuel because I had already been moving people around, so we wouldn't get to South Pole. So if I had to go more trips back and forth to get all this team, there were 30 people, and we had only 4 cars. Then we would be kind of questionable if we had enough fuel to get all the way to South Pole. So knowing that they were coming with 2 cars, I thought I can use them. So I encouraged that we would take the decision now, stop the race, move people 100 kilometers furthermore forward, or 150. And then that was approved, and we used them to help us move the whole start line, or whole group forward. And then we did this going. And I think that was quite good. I mean, it was impressive. Very impressive to see how people and the stories that people have to tell when they have, for me in Iceland, knowing, being in a car that already explodes and half of or most of your team maybe dies and you lose your legs or something. It's out of. Yeah, it was quite, I'm very happy for what they were doing or what they were trying to do and inspire people that have. We've done expeditions like for Hyundai to take the great grandson of Ross in a Hyundai Santa Fe.
That's right.
We had the Nissan going to pole electric vehicle, and we've had some the tractor girl going to South Pole on a tractor. That was also a big story, and different things like this. And then there's individuals that have wanted to do something that has never been done, some special, going to special places or be the first to do something. And then there have been there are many science projects, and just kind of different goals, but mostly for us, we seldom are repeating ourselves. We are mostly doing a new project or something new. But sometimes I think, really we should try to make something just that we can do repeated, because it's so much effort to put into every new project.
Yes. Yeah, relearning every single time.
Yeah. So, but now we have many routes, so we can travel around Antarctica and we have a lot of knowledge, experience, and so yeah, we can offer a lot of things.
Can you
Sorry,
describe to me? Yeah, I was just gonna ask if you could describe to me. So I've never been to either of those places. Like most people, I guess. Could you describe the difference between the north and the south, like the conditions, the environment, maybe the elevation, the landscape? Is one drier? Is one humid? Is there more sea ice? Are there sort of challenges that you would experience up north that you wouldn't down south, and vice versa? Is one busier? Like, what is if you can kind of like place yourself back there, how would you describe each of them and how they are different?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So in Antarctica, up to now, we have only been in summertime. So wintertime, but summertime in Antarctica. So we basically are more or less 24-hour daylight. And that's a huge effect on everything, just to have always a light and the sun to some extent active. But in Antarctica, we are normally starting somewhere close to ice shelf. We are only working in deep field. So tourism to Antarctica, the 9% is the peninsula, it's the ships going with ship with a flight into one of those islands or into the peninsula, which is very, very far from South Pole. Deep field has like less than 2% of the tourism is in deep field, and it only has like it can fly in from either Cape Town or Punta Arenas, and so the numbers are very small, and the area is enormous. So it's 60% bigger than the USA, and when you're traveling, the logistic is basically so that you may have to take years ahead. You have to kind of arrange where are there going to be a fuel in the location so you can do it. So, but today, for our main routes, we have fuel in basically 2 to 3 locations that we can access fuel, and it's normally 1,500 kilometers or less that we have to deal with the fuel. We use, even if we are very efficient on fuel compared to everything else, we are still using a lot of fuel. So fuel is in Antarctica is so expensive that it means everything how you can save fuel, because the cost is enormous, and also carrying it is very difficult to carry it and offload for it to last. In the Arctic, so if you are in the Canadian archipelago or you're in Alaska or somewhere like this, you normally have some small village or something that is somewhere in, let's say, 300-400 kilometers distance or less, and there's actually an airplane that may be there, and stationed there, and there may be people there and things like that. In Antarctica, you are more on your own in that sense. But in Antarctica, if you're traveling, we need to be very aware of crevasses, because there are glaciers, they move and they form crevasse, and you can fall into a crevasse, and that's very risky. But once we have established a route, that it's pretty safe, and it's safe for the whole time when you are there. In the Arctic, we are dealing with lakes and we're dealing with sea ice, and we're in a low altitude. It's warmer, but if we are in February and March, like we sometimes be doing, or February especially, it gets very dark, and then you have wind, and you have even if it's minus, like I feel like I would rather be in Antarctica in minus 45 centigrade than in the Arctic in 30.
Yes,
because the nights
it's like
a night becomes so cold when you lose the sun. So the Arctic is less cold. I think the lowest we have seen is minus 39 in the Arctic. Antarctica, we've gone in minus, and I'm talking Celsius, minus 56. So other thing is that dealing with salty ice, when you always, in your expedition, you're always thinking, okay, if you have fuel to heat up or energy to melt the snow, you always have lots of water, clean water in the Arctic. In Antarctica, you have this always clean water, but in Arctic, you kind of have to be, especially when you're on a sea ice, you have to think about, I have to make sure that I don't take up the salty
okay,
snow.
salty ice. Yeah.
And then I get a bad water or salty water. And once more, also in the Arctic, you have polar bears, or you have life, and you have guns. In the Antarctic, once you leave the ice shelf, there is no life. It's not a bird. There's nothing. Once you get through the mountains, there's nothing living there, and not bugs or anything. So you're very safe on that side. But yeah, and of course the thin air in the Arctic, in Antarctica. It's when you get up to the plateau, you shiver yourself to sleep, maybe if you're in a tent for 1-2 nights or something, and then you acclimatize them. Okay, but you have to pace yourself.
So you are finishing up a very big project, or I don't know if your role is done yet or not, but the Trans Global Car Expedition currently should be wrapping up within the month or so with the team. And this is the world's first wheeled surface navigation of the Earth through both geographic poles. It's a big deal. Can you explain to the listeners that don't know the difference between the magnetic and geographic poles? Because there's a pretty big difference, actually, between the two.
So geographical pole is basically like where the Earth is spindling around, turning around, and it just basically stays at the same time, same place geographically. Magnetic pole is where the magnetic needle on your compass points to, and this is moving around, and it's not always at the same point. And like when we went with Top Gear, we went to the magnetic North Pole as it was I think it was February, March or something in 1996. So that was a specific location, but you cannot put the location in one spot. And that was maybe 2,000, probably close to 2,000 kilometers away from the true geographical pole. So normally the old magnetic pole in the north was very much in the Canadian archipelago, and so that's kind of accessible. I wouldn't say maybe not so accessible, but it's still more accessible than the geographical pole, which is right far out in the oceans. The sea ice comes and goes in the archipelago, and once it freezes in, it is basically kind of stable between the islands and things like that. So you can travel on that with the right knowledge. So you can do it in that time that the ice is there. But outside, you come further north and you get close to the geographical pole. Everything is moving constantly. So meaning that if you don't have you can have an open ocean, you can have that for example our cars would not do. So for the expedition, I was approached by a Transglobal Car. We started with the name of Good Gear Around the World in February 19, and I was asked to arrange the trip around the poles. And so I knew I was fine with us driving the archipelago and driving Greenland, but getting to the geographical pole would be very difficult for us. So we wouldn't do it, because otherwise we have to design some sort of floating device, and I thought that was not. So we went to look into, at the time, Russia was okay, and we went to look at the Russian vehicles, and we studied a vehicle called the Sherp. We studied another kind of mixed of a Russian and German car, and a few number of cars we took a look at. But there was one team that already had made it, which was the Yemelaya. They had made it across from Russia too. So we decided that this would be, because they had already a team that had the experience, this would be the team to deal with. So we decided to use them. And I wanted to find, that left only kind of like, how do we get from Yellowknife to the archipelago? And so that is a route that we had to develop ourselves, or find a way to do, which we tested out in 2022. And that expedition,
that was the test run, right?
That was the test. That was the that's where we went all the way to Resolute, and on the way back we had one car going down. Torvi going down into the water at the time. I don't know if you know about this, but we missed one car into the ice, and we had to go and pick it up later.
Right.
That was a big adventure and a learning experience in the sense that we had planned the route differently, but in 4 days and 2 hours, the ice had gone from 50-60 centimeters down to about 5 to 10 centimeters. Not because of any melt of ocean, just because of underneath current that had just come up. So
it's a big change in a short amount of time.
It's a huge change in a very short time, and that tells you how much the current can do. Because it was minus 30 the whole time. So the outside or the air temperature around, it was just eating up from underneath the ice.
What was the sort of reaction in the local community to that event?
I don't know how it actually. I think we got we got hit by, let's say, there was one club that got very worried about that this was hurting their fishing areas. When I talked to the environmental agency in Canada and I put down everything that went down, it was a very small damage that has happened. In terms of fuel and oil, we had less than 60 liters.
Less than 60 liters?
Yeah. So maybe, what is it, 15 gallons or something of total of liquids. So the car was almost empty of fuel, and we had some oils and stuff like that. So the overall environmental issue was very small, but in relation, it was of course an issue, and we decided immediately we wanted to try to get it out. The way it was handled in the media was like kind of blown up a little bit, I felt, but that's maybe natural, because what happens in the Arctic is people lose snowmobiles down, and they lose, so there are, and nobody talks about it. But,
right.
Half empty car goes down, and yeah.
Right. So I imagine that the media saw this as a story to cover, like these folks are coming in from a bunch of other countries with these vehicles and driving them, up north and losing a vehicle in the water, and then oil and fuel spilling out, and fish population, local population. I'm assuming that is I read a couple of articles, but I'm assuming that's the gist of it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, but I mean, I think fair enough. I mean, we were, this was definitely not planned, and it was a luck, and we were lucky in the sense that it was this car going down, not the other, and one is what had much more fuel and had the trailer and everything like that with the fuel. But I would say to get the car out was a challenging project. But one of the bigger challenges in anything like this is to get a permit to be allowed to go and pick it up and talk to people in the right order and go through the politics of operation like this. It's very complicated.
I bet.
Some feel this is their authority and another authority. It is a complicated. So that was one of the challenges to deal with. Because of course this is unusual, and normally when it happens to the local area, I guess nobody's doing anything or saying anything. But I don't know how it works. But anyway, we made it. We got the car out. We got more or less all the oil and things. We lost 2.7 liters of liquid out of oils that we lost in this accident. So we pulled almost everything out.
You were granted permission to return to complete the expedition, though.
Yes, so we got that permit, yeah. But we had to go a longer way. We need to go outside. There was a new marine protected area that wasn't in our plan originally, so that came out. We only learned about that a few months before we did the expedition. We applied to go through it or over it, because it was marine and not an overland travel. We were not allowed to do that, so we had to go around it, make it the expedition a bit longer, or quite a bit longer on the ice. So that went. We did it, but we did have a problem with Greenland, where the team that did this expedition out onto the ice was mostly from Russia. They were Ukrainian. They were Andrew from Canada and now Belgian, but mostly Russian. And somehow the political situation had changed, so they were stopped from going over Greenland, if it was political or if it was something else or a practical safety issue or something that they complained. So that was kind of we didn't get to go through Greenland. And I was planning to do the same route we did with Scott and Greg when we did in 2018. But we were not allowed to do it, or this team was not allowed to do it. And the vehicles are still at Station North in Greenland.
Oh, they are. Oh, they're still there. Oh, wow.
And and then, Europe, Africa. I mean, their plan was to go through Africa, but that had to change everything went kind of sour in Africa from the first plan. So we went to Morocco, sailed around to Namibia, and did a little trip in Africa there. Then for Antarctica, we were planning to go out on the peninsula. We went out through Union Glacier because the icebreaker that we came in with was 9 days later than I had put in a plan, and 6 days later than I had as the kind of like the last resource of the plans. So we had to shorten a little bit that expedition, but it went okay. We did over 220 kilometers a day. Even we had in some stops, but in that expedition we used the forts. Normally we've been using the Hiluxes and Land Cruiser in Antarctica, but now we use the forts, 6x6.
Yeah, how did the forts do?
I mean, I think they did quite well. I mean, I think we were quite concerned about this, but we had, of course, used them in the Arctic and we used them in Iceland, and we've been kind of like working out. So we had, besides, we had an engine issue which we didn't know how to solve. We had a problem with in one of the cars, and somehow it got solved without we were ever not fully certain how it solved, but the car started again. But besides that, I would say they did very well. I mean, the luxury we have there is no. I mean, we have a camper on the back of two of them. We have much more space inside the car.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like some of my, especially one of my guy that's always going down there, and it's working. This is cheating. It's not fair. I'm just going into the camper, putting on my jackets and things like that to do a work, and I come in and have, it's like it's not any expedition anymore. It's too much luxury.
You're like, you can sleep in the tent if you want.
Yeah. Actually, it's nice to sleep in the tent, but this idea just to come into a warm space and have a cup of coffee or a hot chocolate or a little meal and something like that, and don't have to heat it up or doing anything, and working without taking off your clothes and things like that. It's a new way of doing things in Antarctica.
I like that.
Yeah.
The new way of doing things.
Yeah. No. But we also experimented. We pulled 4,500 liters behind the cars on the sledges. So, and to see if that would work, and that worked. But we need to improve the sledges a bit. We were having some problems with them, but still, the concept is proven. So that basically means that now we can plan an expedition which can cross Antarctica and go back again without having to refuel. So that's a new possibility for us, which we haven't really had before.
Some future plans, maybe future goals.
Yes, exactly.
So I haven't asked you yet to clarify what your role was on this expedition and which legs were you present for? Were you giving expedition support from Iceland? I know you were in person for some of these sections, but what was your primary responsibility?
So for the Transglobal?
Yeah.
You mean? Oh, yeah. So my primary responsibility is basically setting up the plan for the Arctic and Antarctic and selecting the vehicles to use for this expedition. And that's basically, then there's a lot of stuff that I get involved in the expedition planning and things like that. But that was my primary plan. But then over time, I asked Andrew to join the expedition at some point, or to be part of this. There were some changes also inside the program itself. So new people came and different people went. So I mean, I think it was a team that where my main role was basically Antarctica was of course was where I'm expedition leader. Vasily Shaknovsky is the expedition leader for the overall expedition. In Antarctica, legally we need to have an expedition leader that is an hour, and we we do the permit through Arctic Trucks. So for the north, let's say I backed more and more off for the north part, because when Vasily Elikin got involved, he had more important, had already done it. So I said, okay, from this point, I still was involved in fuel and getting permits and trying to get permits there. And I did Greenland. I did the planning, but then I did not take part in getting the permit there. So left that to a team that was on the office that they have. And so, yeah, but I mean, it was a mix. So I had planned to be more involved in more of the trip. But besides the Arctic, we went with our vehicles from Yellowknife to Cambridge Bay. I went with them all the way from New York to Cambridge Bay and then back to Yellowknife. But then I did some part of Europe. I did nothing in Africa, and I did the Antarctica. And then I haven't really had time to go with them in South America. So
each leg has a different team. So I think, was it 6 legs or 7? I can't remember. But each leg is like a section and has a different team, right? But some people go on multiple legs.
Yeah. So basically, the idea originally was that 4 people would do the whole trip. I think there's only going to be one person doing the whole time, which is going to be Zagnoski. So we have 3 sets of vehicles. So we have what we call the continental vehicles, which take people from New York to Yellowknife or to Edmonton. And then they were supposed to go through Iceland, but we did not, because we left Greenland. We didn't do that. But they started then again in Norway, down to Cape Town. And then they start from Punta Arenas and they go back to New York. These are 5 cars for the expedition that all have 35-inch tires. And then we have one vehicle that was a hybrid Ford F-150, which we modified for 44-inch tires and did the Arctic, the first trip in the Arctic. And then we also used it in New York and it drove like this all the way to Yellowknife. But then we took it to Iceland and put it down to 39-inch tires. So from Norway down to Africa, and now all of South America is on 39-inch and will come back to New York on a 39-inch tires. But it's modified for 44. And then we have, that's kind of the continental vehicles. Then we have the 6x6 Fords, which we did Antarctica with. One of them also went from New York to Yellowknife, or from New York actually to Cambridge Bay. And then 2 more went from Edmonton to Cambridge Bay. And then we have the 4 going through the Antarctica. So these are basically, and then we have these Yemilayas, which are Russian-made by basically handmade vehicles. And they
amphibious, right?
The Arctic. They did the Arctic.
Yeah.
So 3 sets, but a lot of Fords in there.
Yeah.
It's kind of unusual for me, but that's
whatever works.
How it ended.
That's great.
But we're happy with that.
What a project. Yeah, it's almost wrapping up, I think, April in New York City. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think the idea is to be in New York on the 5th.
Wow. Okay. That's great.
So I'm gonna try to join them in New York. Really
and
don't
it
have
started...
time, but I
Got to make time for the big party.
Yeah,
is it going to be at the...
Make a time for it. Yeah, exactly. I have to finish it.
Is it finished at the Explorers Club? Because I know that you started. That's where it started.
Yeah. So that's the idea.
Great.
That's the plan. Andrew is working on this, but he's going to try to join them in Mexico City, I think.
Oh, great. Very nice. I could talk to you about this all day, but I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about Arctic Trucks.
Mm-hmm.
So started in Iceland, obviously, and now there are many locations throughout Europe, North America, UK, Middle East. Do they have specialization? Like, obviously, the priorities for somebody in North America will be different than the Middle East, which will be different than Iceland. What are their responsibilities or the niches that each of those locations has?
So in Iceland is basically the birthplace of it, and let's say Iceland has the whole range from like, we call it AT, so like Arctic Trucks, and then we have the tire size. So if it's a car that comes on a smaller than 33, we make an AT33, an AT35, AT37, and up to 44. Normally, we've done 46, 49, but normally 44 is the biggest we do. So Iceland mentality, if you think about it, is that there's a long history and the approach is quite practical. in the sense, you want a car that functions for you. You know how to deflate the tires, how to make use of it. You know where's the risk and things like that. So people are, I would say, at least 50% or more of the clients are really using it for what they, for the adventure or for practical uses. Maybe somebody takes a Land Cruiser 8035 and he will go into the mountains and he will deflate the tires to get a softer ride over bad roads and inflate again and make use of it. And then you have rescue teams, you have police, you have all sorts of it's bigger conversions and individuals that are basically to travel the glaciers and travel the highlands and doing something that's bigger. But then we have like in the UK. So the UK, when our team there, they are embraced by people that are looking at different things. I mean, the car looks really nice, and they make this extra branding or mark and painting on something, so the car looks very elegant.
Right.
It's kind of like they have this sense of making the car this little additional. So we always try to make the car be like an original car. So it comes from our Toyota time. We were basically making a Toyota better. We were making a better Toyota for our clients. We wanted the car not to look like an off-road aftermarket loaded with all sorts of stuff, like an off-road kind of type of mentality. Our thing was to make it very kind of like part of like an AMG for a Mercedes, a little bit of this extra on top of the Toyota. But they do this better because they live in that kind of environment where this is kind of like the high. So, and they are normally not selling anything more than 8037. Iceland is 8044. It's we need and the same with Norway. I mean, that's the same. 8037 is the biggest. Mostly it's 35 or something like that. And the UAE is all maybe 30. With a few exceptions, I think they're doing mostly 35. It's conversions. And the same, we have in South Africa, we have an agreement with the Isuzu factory. They are making it in the factory, 35-inch Isuzu D-Max. And so, but America, we started there basically only with 44.
Oh, wow.
So that is kind of like the extreme, because that's basically driven by the needs of Arctic Trucks Polar, which is doing those expeditions.
Yeah.
What we are missing is to do this smaller, so that car that is still very friendly to walk in and out of. You go to the store and things like that. You sit a little bit higher, but not much higher, and you have a very stable car and drives well. But you can do some more extra on some off-road, but you're not gonna. It's not like a car you want to go and play around with and damage. It's this kind of. So yeah, so that is something that we're missing, and we should be. I hope we will be doing sooner in the US, and I hope people will like that.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Tell me a little bit about the Arctic Trucks experience.
So
from what I gather, their trip. Yeah.
So Arctic Trucks experience is basically, I would say, after COVID, it's basically not taken up any seriously. We basically put it down, and we have had so much to do, the team, that we haven't really put much effort onto it. There are now a few guys that are running this, but the effort is very small on the name and on this at this moment, at least. We may change that soon.
Yeah, you probably have a few other things going on at the moment to keep you busy. Great. Well, it'll be interesting to see more of that if it comes to fruition.
So I mean, I think so. I mean, I'm thinking about what to do about Arctic Trucks experience, but I'm like more thinking now. Okay, how do we build up? I mean, we have a lot of requests from science and things like that for Antarctica. But I feel that I should be doing something more for tourism. We should be empathizing tourism in Antarctica, that we can do some, South Pole drives and things like that. So that is something that I would like to put a little focus on.
Interesting. That sounds like a whole podcast episode in and of itself, discussing polar tourism. So interesting.
Pole, it's a bit special.
Tell me a little bit about, what does Emil Grímsson do in his spare time? What are your hobbies when you're not at Arctic Trucks? What do you love to do?
So for the past, if you ask my wife, it's probably Arctic Trucks, my hobby. But I mean, I think what I do in my, I don't have much free time, but I sometimes, I like to walk mountains. I like to go just hiking, and do some kind of like not directly climbing, but kind of in between there. Mountain biking, cross-country skiing is nice. Yeah, but I mean, then I don't have very much. I'm intending to have more time in the future, but right now I'm too young for that.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah,
It will come. It will come.
it will come. It will come.
Do you have any big dream stuff? Like what's next for you? Do you have any big projects coming up that you're really excited about that you can actually talk about? Is there anything that is like
been attempts made to do a winter crossing of Antarctica. So winter starts, Antarctica has summer and winter, no spring or fall. So and there, this has never been done before. This is a huge project, and we believe we have a plan to do it, and this is something that is kind of like we did get advice to help a project that was tried some years ago and failed. We kind of knew it would fail, but we still gave them some training and crevasses and things like that. Didn't want our name to be involved in it because we were afraid that it wouldn't work, and didn't work. But we think we know how to do it. I mean, this may be a little bit selfish. Maybe you can take that out, that we did. But anyway, so our idea is to, within a few years, we want to make this winter crossing where it crosses after 21st of March, and we want to do a fast drive across Antarctica. Of course, South Pole will be dark and it'll be quite cold, but we want to do a quite. This will be, I would say, one of the few or last things that have kind of big things that haven't been completed.
Right. That's what you've been up to in your spare time between going hiking and skiing.
We are the team here. We are looking into. We were studying this, especially 2-3 years ago, how would we do it. And there was a client that was going to go for it, and so we went through the road, but that client then didn't have enough health. He was getting too old, so we didn't. The COVID then kind of like closed it up. But
yeah.
But then this is more than 3 years ago. So that's one of the big projects. But otherwise, I mean, I just have to look at the map here. There's a mountain. Nobody has climbed that mountain. Okay, how can we get there? There are endless of things like this to look at.
For sure. That's great. Well, I look forward to seeing what's next for you, and exciting time. I have one last question, maybe two, and then we can wrap it up.
Yep.
Yeah. Scott always asks guests, which I love this question, but what is your favorite book?
My favorite book? Wow. I have to be honest, I haven't read a book for, I don't know, 20 or 30 years or something. Not a full book.
What about an audiobook?
Audiobook, yeah. I mean, I think, in Antarctica we listen to audiobooks, and we're listening to a lot of Antarctica or Arctic stories. So that's I'm very fascinated about some of the older explorers, how they, and I mean, like the Shackleton, and I don't think I can name one specific, but that subject, because you are so close to it, and you are kind of thinking, you're sitting here in a car, you have a phone, you have a navigation that you know where you are exactly, and they were there. They didn't know what was ahead of them, and they were navigating by, what is it called, taking the height of the sun and a small compass and counting the kilometers or the distance, and relying on nothing. Nobody would hear from them for a year or something. It's kind of, and still they went again. And you can imagine how addictive this is. How do you, I'm not sure if I would do that. Yeah. But it's addictive. This adventure, there is something about it. So I think there's something in our blood which is explorers kind of type of thing, and for many people this is something very addictive, and for other people maybe they don't like it. It's not for them. But like I said before, I mean, I've come back to let's say civilization, and kind of like looked at a toilet in a hotel room and the shower, and everything is right there, and kind of like, wow, what a luxury.
Right.
Things we take for granted every day.
We do. Yeah. I'm in a hotel room in Turkey right now.
You're in Turkey
for this podcast. Okay. Yeah, I'm in Turkey, but you're explaining exactly how I feel living in a camper full time and coming into a $40 a night hotel with hot shower and a bed and a flush toilet we do take it for granted every single day. So yeah, I guess we'll wrap up. And for the Overland Journal podcast listeners, where can we find more about you and Arctic Trucks?
Okay, so Arctic Trucks is just arctictrucks.com.
Perfect.
And I don't really have anything specific on me in that sense, that other than I, kind of like just my name, and I pop up on some things. I haven't done really anything like that. So
yeah, so arctictrucks.com, Transglobal Car Expedition also has a great website. So those are both excellent resources to find you. Thank you, Elle, so much for joining me on the Overland Journal podcast today. It was fascinating chatting with you. I could probably, if you were going to do some sort of like class on polar expeditions and planning, I would definitely attend it, just so you know, knowing nothing about polar expeditions other than what you told me. It's super fascinating. One day I'd love to dive into how you look at the route planning and movement of sea ice, things like that. It's so interesting to me from a terrain and planning perspective. But anyways, I'm sure you'll be on this podcast again. So thank you so much for taking the time. And thank you so much to the Overland Journal podcast listeners for tuning in. And we'll check you out next time.
Thank you, Ashley, and good luck to you for all your adventures. You're going ahead now. So it's very nice to talk to you. Thank you.